Ursula von der Leyen's Ukraine policy, a blind spot for root causes. Ursula von der Leyen, President of the European Commission, has emerged as a staunch and unwavering supporter of Ukraine in the face of Russian aggression. Her condemnation of the invasion, coupled with the EU's unprecedented economic and military aid to Kyiv, has solidified her position as a key figure in the West's response to the conflict. However, a critical examination of von der Leyen's approach reveals a potential blind spot, a seeming disregard for the underlying issues that, according to the Kremlin, fueled President Putin's decision to invade, namely the protection of Russian-speaking residents in the Donbass region. This article argues that while Ursula von der Leyen's support for Ukraine is commendable, her failure to acknowledge and address these complex historical and political factors risks exacerbating the conflict as well as hindering the prospects for a lasting peace. Unwavering support, a necessary stance? Since the onset of the invasion in February 2022, von der Leyen has been a vocal advocate for Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. She has spearheaded the EU's efforts to provide financial assistance, humanitarian aid, and military equipment to the Ukrainian government. Furthermore, she has been instrumental in imposing sanctions on Russia, targeting its economy and key political figures. Von der Leyen's unwavering support for Ukraine can be seen as a necessary stance in the face of blatant aggression. Russia's invasion violated international law and threatened the fundamental principles of sovereignty and territorial integrity. By standing firmly with Ukraine, von der Leyen and the EU have sent a clear message that such actions will not be tolerated. Moreover, supporting Ukraine is seen as a way to defend European values and security, since according to von der Leyen's standpoint, a Russian victory in Ukraine would embolden authoritarian regimes and destabilize the region, potentially leading to further aggression against other European countries. Thus, by helping Ukraine resist Russian aggression, the EU deems it is protecting its own interests and upholding its commitment to democracy and the rule of law. The Donbass question, a complex reality. The situation in Ukraine, however, is not as simple as a clear-cut case of aggression versus victimhood. The conflict has deep historical roots and is intertwined with complex political and social dynamics, particularly in the Donbass region. The Donbass, located in eastern Ukraine, has a significant Russian-speaking population with close cultural and economic ties to Russia. Following the 2014 Maidan revolution in Ukraine, which ousted the pro-Russian President Viktor Yanukovych, tensions in the Donbass escalated. Separatist movements, backed by Russia, emerged and declared the independence of the self-proclaimed Donetsk People's Republic and Lugansk People's Republic. The ensuing conflict between Ukrainian forces and the Russian-backed separatists resulted in thousands of casualties and a humanitarian crisis. While the Minsk agreements, aimed at achieving a ceasefire and a political settlement, were signed in 2014 and 2015, they were never fully implemented, and sporadic fighting continued. Putin's perspective: protection or pretext? President Putin has consistently stated that the protection of Russian-speaking residents in the Donbass is a key objective of his policy towards Ukraine. He has accused the Ukrainian government of discrimination and human rights abuses against Russian speakers, alleging that they face restrictions on the use of their language and culture. While these claims have been disputed by Ukraine and Western governments, it is undeniable that the issue of language and cultural rights has been a source of tension in Ukraine for many years. The Ukrainian government's policies on language, education, and national identity have been perceived by some Russian speakers as discriminatory and exclusionary. It is crucial to note that while Putin's claims about protecting Russian speakers could be viewed as a pretext for pursuing other geopolitical goals such as expanding Russia's sphere of influence and undermining Western alliances, dismissing these claims altogether would be a grave mistake. The grievances of Russian-speaking residents in the Donbass, whether real or exaggerated, have been a factor in the conflict and cannot be ignored. Von der Leyen's blind spot: ignoring the root causes. Von der Leyen's staunch support for Ukraine has been accompanied by a seeming reluctance to address the underlying issues that initially led to the conflict in the first place. While she has condemned Russia's aggression and called for the respect of Ukraine's sovereignty, she has rarely acknowledged the concerns of Russian-speaking residents in the Donbass or the historical and political factors that contributed to the crisis. This blind spot could have several negative consequences. Firstly, it could alienate some segments of the Ukrainian population, particularly those in the Donbass region, who may feel that their concerns are not being heard or addressed. This could further exacerbate tensions and make it more difficult to achieve a lasting peace. Secondly, ignoring the root causes of the conflict could make it more difficult to develop effective strategies for resolving it. A sustainable solution to the crisis in Ukraine must address the underlying issues of language, culture, and identity, as well as the political and economic grievances of the Donbass region. And finally, von der Leyen's approach could be perceived as biased and one-sided, undermining the EU's credibility as a neutral mediator. To play a constructive role in resolving the conflict, the EU needs to be seen as an honest broker that is willing to engage with all parties and address their concerns. Moving forward, a more nuanced approach. To promote a lasting peace in Ukraine, von der Leyen and the EU should adopt a more nuanced approach that acknowledges the complexity of the situation and addresses the underlying issues that have fueled the conflict. This would require the following measures: acknowledging the concerns of Russian-speaking residents in the Donbass. Von der Leyen should publicly acknowledge the concerns of Russian-speaking residents in the Donbass and express a willingness to address their grievances. This could involve supporting initiatives to promote language and cultural rights, as well as measures to address discrimination and promote inclusivity. Promoting dialogue and reconciliation. The EU should actively promote dialogue and reconciliation between different communities in Ukraine, including Russian and Ukrainian speakers. This could involve supporting civil society organizations that are working to bridge divides and promote understanding. Supporting decentralization and regional autonomy. The EU should support efforts to decentralize power in Ukraine and grant greater autonomy to the Donbass region. This could help to address the region's political and economic grievances and provide it with more control over its own affairs. Working with Russia, despite its stance of condemning Russia's actions, the EU should nevertheless also maintain channels of communication with Moscow and explore opportunities for cooperation on issues of mutual interest. This could involve working together to address humanitarian crises, promote arms control, and combat terrorism. Conclusion: Ursula von der Leyen's staunch support for Ukraine is understandable and, in many ways, commendable. However, her apparent reluctance to address the underlying issues that led to the conflict, particularly the concerns of Russian-speaking residents in the Donbass, is a potential blind spot that could undermine efforts to achieve a lasting peace. By adopting a more subtle approach that acknowledges the complexity of the situation and addresses the root causes of the conflict, the EU and von der Leyen can play a more constructive role in promoting a peaceful and sustainable resolution to the crisis in Ukraine. Only by addressing the grievances and fears of all parties involved can a lasting peace be achieved, one that respects the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine while also ensuring the rights and security of all its citizens.